Welcome to Spicer and Company. I'm Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Well, Sean, we've seen a lot lately. Nancy Pelosi has been very critical of President Trump, and one of her reasons says he doesn't listen to the medical experts. But this is really interesting. She apparently doesn't like to listen to Dr. Deborah Birx herself.
Yeah, isn't this odd? Pelosi's been clear that she thinks the president should be listening to experts and that she despises these attacks that the president lays at the hands of government institution and government, officials. But when it comes to Dr. Birx, she's very clear she doesn't trust her, and she thinks that the president, listening to her is ridiculous. Take a listen to what she said about her.
I don't have confidence in anyone who stands there while the president says, swallow Lysol and it's going to cure your virus. You'll kill you and you won't have the virus anymore. I'm not have confidence in somebody when the president says it's a hoax, it's magic, it's going to go away by magic, it's a miracle, and all of those things.
All right, well, to discuss this, let's bring in Fourth Watch editor Steve Krauker. Steve, thanks for coming back and joining us.
Thanks, Sean. Good to be here.
So there's two things about that comment that Pelosi made to CNN's Jim Shooter that I thought was interesting. One, and I don't want to get off on a tangent on this, but she says, I don't trust her because she stood by him while he argued that you should drink Lysol. He did not ever say that. He never advocated anyone drink Lysol. And Shooter sits there and just goes, The second thing is, Dr. Birx is a government official that has served this country. She was a retired colonel in the Army. She was appointed by Barack Obama to serve in the State Department. And here she is getting attacked by Nancy Pelosi. And again, no one on CNN is saying, excuse me, Madam Speaker, this is the kind of thing you've railed against. Don't you think that you're now guilty of it too? So they've sat there and let her say something that wasn't true, number one. Number two, she goes after Dr. Birx, who is a public servant appointed by Obama after a service in the Army, and no pushback from the host.
Sean, I totally agree. I mean, as a media observer, my focus instantly drifted to Jim Shooter, who, by the way, before he was a supposedly objective news anchor on CNN, he served in the Obama administration previously. So not exactly an objective observer in all this. But, she blatantly said something, as you said, Donald Trump didn't actually advocate for anything, certainly not to swallow Lysol, like she said, but did in fact say, ask a question, which, was probably not the right form to be asking a question about injecting disinfectant. Completely different. Obviously that's true, goes uncorrected. But no, to your point, total hypocrisy that we see from, and it really goes back to this thing that we're seeing in the media, on Twitter, and certainly within the Democratic Party as well. If you are not so far into the resistance, if Dr. Birx is not essentially, anonymous writing New York Times op-eds, she is not properly serving the public of being anti-Trump. I mean, you can no longer just be an objective, do your job, be fair. I mean, that's not good enough, and the hypocrisy is very, very clear.
Yeah, and it's clear too, Elizabeth Warren made some comments about if a vaccine came out, we shouldn't trust it because it's under Trump. And again, a vaccine would get approved through the FDA and the CDC, I'm sure, would take a look at it. But the idea that these Democrats continue to go about and undermine the same institutions which they accuse Trump of undermining and get zero pushback from the media seems to really prove, to your point, the hypocrisy that exists among all of these sort of legacy media outlets. They go after Trump for one thing, but when the leader of their party, either Speaker Pelosi or Elizabeth Warren, says something, they're absolutely silent in terms of pushback.
Right. Now, you talk about that. It's so damaging to a public that is, look, I mean, the pandemic is a scary thing. People want real information that they can trust. When one side of the aisle, like you mentioned with Elizabeth Warren, there was a New York Times podcast last week that had a poll where more than half the country is skeptical, at least, of a coronavirus vaccine. And they were thinking, well, why is this? A lot of it is this distrust that's being sowed by the left of Donald Trump, who honestly has there's no thing one way or the other. He's not going to, fast track a vaccine that's not ready to go. He has no power to do that. It has to go through the institutions that we are told are, non-biased and non-political. So it's completely absurd, and it's really damaging because this is not something that should be politicized by either side. But certainly, this is a scientific, and it's people are scared. People are concerned for their lives and the lives of their kids. A vaccine should not be a politicized issue.
Correct. Steve, let me switch gears a second. You had a really good interview with Billy Bush that you posted on your site, Fourth Watch. I thought one of the things that was really interesting that came out of that discussion, it was unbelievably candid. And I really thought that it was such a great interview because I thought your questions were really good and they elicited some really good responses that I thought were insightful from Billy as to the president. The thing that I think that was so fascinating of all of it was that when you were talking about NBC, he says, ironically, the network that despises him the most is the one that built him back in their laboratory in 2002 with the launch of The Apprentice. The persona people voted for to fix America in a no-nonsense tough guy was made and marketed by NBC. My, how times change.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really was great. I've gotten to know Billy a little bit in the last couple months. Obviously, if you go back, he was sort of the first of the kind of the Trump era cancel culture, maybe overreaction, I don't want to say victims, but certainly someone who was axed by NBC for, just the association with the Access Hollywood tape. Now he's an extra. He knows it more than anyone, but by being at NBC himself, one of the other interesting things he said was that before Donald Trump was protected by NBC as to the utmost extreme, and because he was there, he was literally the biggest star at the network for a time. Now, in 2016, they did everything in their possible power to essentially railroad him, and certainly the entire media has continued as well. I don't know if there's anyone who understands that even better than Billy Bush, and I thought he was very candid about talking about that.
Yeah, it's a great interview and so insightful. I love that point that gets made about NBC because it's so true. They built him up, they protected him, and as soon as he flew out of the nest, it was like free shots at him because we got to take him down, even though we built him. I want to talk to you a little bit about our next guest coming up. It's a state representative from Jordan, Vernon Jordan. He had an interview with Craig Melvin. I want to play you a snippet that I want the audience to listen to and then ask you to react to.
Are you a paid campaign surrogate? Are you being compensated
Never
by
received. Let me be clear. You get paid to shape a liberal narrative.
So here's the thing. After that exchange, Steve, he gets asked, Melvin says, I ask this question all the time to folks on the left. Are you aware as a media observer of any time that anybody, Craig Melvin, anybody else, has ever asked anybody on the left that question?
No, Sean, it's a crazy story. I'm going to be writing more about it at fourthwatch.media tonight. I've never really heard that before, but actually about 4 days earlier, someone else on MSNBC, Tiffany Cross, asked a very similar thing of another African-American Trump surrogate named Bruce Lavelle, if he had some financial advantage by going on TV and defending Donald Trump. Within a 4-day span. Very weird. Obviously, it's completely insulting, and I think it kind of comes from two points of view. Yeah,
it is.
Yes, there's just out of touch, spending too much time in newsrooms and green rooms, never meeting anyone who would defend Donald Trump of any race or creed. But I will also say I think there's something else to it, because there's some sort of like this conspiracy nature that goes from floating from the fringes on both sides into this pretty public display on from Craig Melvin, who is the host of the Today Show, in addition to what he does on MSNBC. This conspiracy theory starts floating into the mainstream in a really disturbing way.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to ask him. I look forward to seeing what you guys post on it. I hope everyone takes a look at this interview coming up. It's going to be great. So thank you for being here and sharing your insights, Steve.
Thanks, Sean. Good to talk to you.
All right. Still to come when we come back, more on that exchange between MSNBC's Craig Melvin and Georgia Democratic State Representative Vernon Jones. Jones is going to be here and join us right next after this break. Plus, another high-profile woman is resigning from the left-leaning media. We're going to discuss the many reasons that employees are being unfairly pushed out. And later, it's one of the most important duties of the President of the United States, picking a Supreme Court justice. So what should the GOP do if a vacancy opens up? We're going to ask Jordan Sekulow. All that's coming up.